Millionaire Richard Blackstone boarded the first-class cabin of the transatlantic flight with the swagger of a man who owned the world, or at least a significant chunk of it through his mining empire in Africa. At 52, with a gold Rolex gleaming on his wrist and a custom-tailored suit that screamed old money, he was the epitome of untouchable privilege. As he settled into his spacious seat, his eyes scanned the cabin dismissively, landing on a black woman 2 rows ahead. She was 34-year-old Diana Thompson, quietly holding her 5-year-old son on her lap, her worn leather bag tucked beside her. The boy played silently with a toy airplane, oblivious to the storm about to brew. "We pay for first class to fly in peace, not to babysit," Richard muttered loudly enough for the cabin to hear, his voice dripping with disdain. His personal assistant, Melissa, a sharp-featured woman in her late 20s, nodded in agreement, her manicured fingers tapping on her tablet. "Look at that kid. Bet he doesn't even know what manners are," she whispered back, but her words carried. Richard's laughter erupted, a booming, mocking sound that drew approving murmurs from a few elite passengers nearby, their own prejudices quietly surfacing in the confined space. Diana felt the words like pinpricks, but she kept her gaze fixed ahead, pretending to adjust her son's blanket. Her fingers brushed the strap of her bag, where something far more powerful than a ticket lay hidden, a tool that could unravel empires. She was no ordinary traveler. For 3 years, she'd been piecing together a web of evidence against Blackstone Industries, Richard's billion-dollar behemoth accused of illegal mining in the Democratic Republic of Congo. But here, in this moment, she was just a mother enduring the glare of a bigot. The laughter grew as Richard leaned toward Melissa, gesturing wildly. "I mean, seriously, who lets a single mom like that in here? Probably scraped together miles from cleaning jobs or something. No father in sight. Typical." His Rolex caught the overhead light again, a flashy symbol of his self-proclaimed superiority. Diana's grip tightened on her bag, but she smiled inwardly, a secret curve of her lips reflecting in the window. She knew his type. Men like Richard, who built fortunes on the backs of the vulnerable, always underestimated those they deemed beneath them. The flight attendant, a young woman named Sarah with a forced professional smile, approached hesitantly after Richard snapped his fingers imperiously. "Stewardess! Shouldn't you verify if everyone here actually belongs? I'm certain there's a mix-up with her ticket." Sarah's eyes flicked uncomfortably to Diana. "Ma'am, could I please see your boarding pass?" Diana complied calmly, slipping out her ticket along with a discreet official ID that only Sarah could glimpse. The attendant's eyes widened in recognition, her posture straightening instantly. "Everything checks out, Mr. Blackstone," Sarah replied curtly, turning back to him with a neutral expression that masked her surprise. Richard huffed, settling back with a smirk. But the exchange had planted the first seed of unease in the cabin. Diana whispered softly to her son. "Just a little longer, sweetie. Mommy's got this under control." Unbeknownst to Richard, this flight wasn't random. It was the culmination of meticulous planning, with the captain himself, Tom Mitchell, an old ally in her investigations, at the controls. As the plane taxied down the runway, Richard's mocking continued in snippets, drawing more glances. "Bet she's heading to some welfare conference," he quipped to Melissa, who giggled obligingly. Diana closed her eyes briefly, drawing strength from memories of Joseph Mamba, the community leader whose death at the hands of Blackstone's operations had fueled her quest. The engines roared to life, lifting them into the sky, but the real turbulence was just beginning in the first-class cabin. What Richard couldn't fathom was that his laughter targeted the wrong woman, a force of justice disguised in humility, ready to turn his arrogance into his undoing. The air hummed with unspoken secrets, and as the seatbelt sign dimmed, Diana activated a tiny recording device in her bag, capturing every venomous word for the reckoning ahead. Richard's voice grew louder, emboldened by the murmurs of agreement from nearby passengers. "Melissa, call Thompson at Miami Airport Security," he said deliberately, twirling his phone like a trophy. "I want them to check this woman when we land. Something tells me she's out of place." His words were a calculated performance, designed to humiliate. Diana rocked her sleeping son, her face a mask of calm, though her heart raced. Every syllable Richard uttered was being recorded, each insult another nail in his coffin. She knew she needed to stay composed. She was playing a long game. The cabin buzzed with tension. A businessman in a pinstripe suit whispered to his companion, "He's got a point. First class isn't for everyone." Another passenger, an older woman draped in pearls, nodded subtly. Diana caught their glances but kept her focus on her son, whispering, "Sleep, baby. We're almost there." Her mind flashed to a dirt road in Kinshasa, where Joseph Mamba's body had been found 3 years ago, beaten and discarded after exposing Blackstone Industries' illegal mines. That memory steeled her resolve. Richard wasn't done. "Look at her bag," he scoffed, pointing at Diana's worn leather satchel, "probably stuffed with coupons and hand-me-downs." Melissa smirked, adding, "I bet she's never seen a real paycheck." The cruelty hung in the air, but Diana's fingers traced the outline of her laptop inside that bag, loaded with evidence: photos of polluted rivers, recordings of bribed officials, and lists of workers killed to silence dissent. She was no maid, no charity case. She was a predator in disguise, hunting a predator. Sarah, the flight attendant, returned, her expression strained. "Mr. Blackstone, the captain would like a word in the cockpit." Richard's chest puffed out. "Of course, he probably wants to thank me for my loyalty to this airline." He adjusted his $3,000 suit and strode down the aisle, leaving Melissa to watch Diana like a hawk. "Keep an eye on her," he muttered. "We don't want trouble." Diana's lips twitched with the ghost of a smile. Trouble was exactly what she was bringing. In her mind, Diana saw Joseph's face, his warm smile during their humanitarian mission in Kinshasa a decade ago. They'd been lovers once, two idealistic 20-somethings dreaming of a better world. His murder had shattered her, but it also forged her into the investigator she was now. She'd spent years infiltrating Blackstone's operations, cultivating informants and documenting crimes. This flight was no accident. It was a trap, and Richard was walking right into it. Passengers began whispering among themselves. "Do you think she's really out of place?" one asked. Another replied, "Blackstone's right, something's off." Their words stung, but Diana let them wash over her. She opened her phone, glancing at a photo of her and Joseph, arms around each other in a Congolese village. Her son, asleep on her lap, wasn't biologically hers. He was Joseph's, entrusted to her by his widow, Amara, to keep him safe from the violence that claimed his father. Richard returned from the cockpit, his face flushed with irritation. The captain, Tom Mitchell, had cited security protocols and refused to discuss Diana. "Unbelievable," Richard muttered, slumping into his seat. "They protect their own, don't they?" Melissa leaned in, whispering, "She's probably nobody, Richard. Just ignore her." But Diana wasn't nobody. She was the lead investigator for the International Criminal Court, and every move she made was calculated. The plane cruised at 30,000 feet, but the atmosphere in first class was suffocating. Diana's calm exterior hid a storm of purpose. She adjusted her son's blanket, her fingers brushing the recorder in her bag. Richard's voice carried again. "I bet she's a cleaner, pretending to be someone." Diana's eyes met his briefly in the window's reflection, and she allowed herself a small, knowing smile. He was digging his own grave, and she was ready to bury him. She thought of the Congolese families destroyed by Blackstone's greed, children orphaned, rivers poisoned, communities silenced. Her bag held more than a recorder. It contained a sealed envelope with photos of Joseph's final moments, beaten by Blackstone's security. She'd promised Amara justice, and today she was closer than ever. As Richard continued his taunts, oblivious to the noose tightening, Diana prepared to steer the conversation where she needed it to go. Diana's calm was a fortress, built on 3 years of relentless pursuit. She wasn't just a passenger. She was the architect of an international sting targeting Blackstone Industries. Her investigation began when Joseph Mamba, a charismatic community leader, sent her encrypted files exposing illegal mining in the Democratic Republic of Congo. The files detailed child labor, environmental devastation, and murders to silence opposition. Joseph had been her first love, a bond forged during a humanitarian mission in Kinshasa when she was 22. His death, ordered by Blackstone's security, had turned her grief into a weapon. On the plane, Richard's voice cut through her thoughts. "These people always think they belong where they don't," he sneered to Melissa, gesturing at Diana. She ignored him, her mind replaying the moment she'd learned of Joseph's death. Found in a ditch, his body broken, he'd left behind a wife, Amara, and 2 children. Diana had adopted his youngest, the boy now sleeping in her arms, to protect him from the same fate. Her bag held evidence that could topple an empire. Recordings of intercepted calls, photos of clandestine mines, and names of officials bribed by Richard. Her investigation wasn't solo. Captain Tom Mitchell, a former CIA operative with 15 years of covert experience, was her ally. They'd met 4 years ago when Diana needed access to air routes over Congo to document Blackstone's operations. Their professional partnership had deepened into trust after Joseph's murder. Tom was no ordinary pilot. He was monitoring the cabin from the cockpit, ensuring Diana's transmissions reached the International Criminal Court in The Hague. Diana's laptop contained a digital fortress of evidence. She'd infiltrated informants into Blackstone's minds, workers, foremen, even a disgruntled executive. They'd smuggled out documents proving the company's crimes. Toxic waste dumped in rivers, workers paid pennies, and community leaders like Joseph eliminated. Her recorder, now active, captured Richard's every word, each insult a bonus to her case. She glanced at her son, whispering, "For Daddy Joseph, baby." Richard leaned toward Melissa, oblivious. "She's probably scamming someone to be here," he said loudly. Diana's heart ached, but her resolve was iron. She remembered Joseph's last message. "They're killing us for the truth. Diana, don't let them win." She hadn't. She'd spent sleepless nights mapping Blackstone's network, from New York boardrooms to Congolese villages. Her evidence included a video of a mine collapse that killed 12 workers, covered up by Richard's bribes. The cabin's atmosphere grew heavier. A passenger muttered, "Why doesn't she say something?" Another replied, "She knows her place." But Diana's place was at the heart of this operation. Her ID, shown to Sarah earlier, marked her as a chief investigator for the ICC. She'd chosen this flight, knowing Richard would be aboard, his arrogance her greatest asset. Every sneer he threw her way was another chance to bait him. Her thoughts drifted to Amara, Joseph's widow, now in Kinshasa, listening to the live feed with an NGO. Amara had entrusted Diana with her son and her hope for justice. Diana's bag also held a USB drive with Joseph's final letter, detailing Blackstone's orders to silence him. She'd vowed to use it to destroy Richard, not just for Joseph, but for the 22 other community leaders killed by his company. Richard's voice broke her reverie. "I'm telling you, Melissa, people like her don't belong here." Diana adjusted her son's blanket, her fingers brushing the transmitter in her bag. It was broadcasting to The Hague, Quantico, and Kinshasa. She was no victim. She was a hunter, and Richard was her prey. As the plane soared, she prepared to nudge him toward the confessions that would seal his fate. Diana knew the moment had come to push Richard further. His arrogance was her weapon, and she wielded it with precision. "Excuse me, Mr. Blackstone," she said calmly, turning to him for the first time. Her voice was soft but deliberate, cutting through the cabin's hum. "I hear you have business in the Democratic Republic of Congo. That must be fascinating work." Richard blinked, caught off guard. "So you do speak?" he sneered, leaning forward. "What would someone like you know about international business?" Diana tilted her head, feigning curiosity. "I've read about the challenges with local workers there. It must be tough balancing costs with all those environmental and labor regulations." It was the perfect bait, and Richard took it, his ego overriding caution. "Regulations?" He laughed, loud enough for nearby passengers to turn. "Honey, you don't get how the real world works. Those people need jobs. Without my mines, they'd starve," she nodded innocently. "I suppose you have to take some liberties with local rules to keep things running smoothly." Richard's eyes gleamed with smugness. "Liberties? That continent runs on one language, money. Local officials understand it perfectly." Melissa shifted uncomfortably. "Richard, maybe we shouldn't." He waved her off. "What's she going to do? Sue a billion-dollar company?" The cabin chuckled, but Diana's recorder captured every word. Her pulse quickened, but her face remained serene. She thought of Joseph Mamba, beaten to death for challenging Blackstone's mines. She needed more, a confession tied to his murder. "There must be local obstacles sometimes," she said casually. "People who don't see the benefits of development." Richard nodded arrogantly. "Always, but those obstacles tend to disappear when necessary." The words hung heavy, a veiled admission of violence. Diana pressed further. "It must be frustrating when local leaders keep objecting." Richard's smile turned bitter. "Frustrating? You have no idea how stubborn they can be. Like this one guy 3 years ago. Joseph something. Mwamba, I think. Organizing protests, talking to journalists, delaying our schedules." Diana's heart pounded, but she kept her tone neutral. "What happened to him?" Richard shrugged, cruelly indifferent. "Problems resolve themselves with the right contacts. Our security chief, ex-military, had a persuasive talk with him. The confession was damning." Diana's recorder caught every syllable, broadcasting live to The Hague, where Deputy Prosecutor Dr. Ingrid Larson listened intently. In the cockpit, Tom Mitchell whispered into his headset, "Control, we have a direct admission to Joseph Mamba's murder." Passengers began to notice the shift. Richard's reckless words were drawing attention. A woman in a silk scarf whispered, "Did he just say what I think he did?" Richard, oblivious, continued, "These activists think they're heroes, but they're just obstacles to progress. Joseph thought he could take down my company with speeches. Pathetic." Diana's eyes burned with tears, but she held steady. She glanced at her son, whispering, "Daddy Joseph would be proud." Her bag held photos of Joseph's beating, taken by a hidden camera, evidence Richard didn't know existed. In The Hague, Dr. Larson stood. "Issue the international warrant. Coordinate with Miami for detention on landing." In Kinshasa, Amara listened, tears streaming as she held her children. Diana pushed one last time. "So people like Joseph just disappear?" Richard laughed. "Exactly. You deal with them, and business moves on." The cabin was silent now, passengers staring in shock. Diana's transmitter ensured every word reached the authorities. The plane's intercom crackled, and Captain Tom Mitchell's voice filled the cabin. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain. We've received an urgent directive from Miami authorities. This flight is now under special protocol due to an ongoing international investigation. Please remain seated." The announcement hit like a thunderbolt. Richard's face paled, his Rolex suddenly seeming like a shackle. Melissa clutched her phone, her eyes darting to Diana. Diana sat calmly, stroking her son's hair. She'd orchestrated this moment for 3 years. Her transmitter had sent Richard's confessions to the ICC, the FBI, and Congolese authorities. In The Hague, Dr. Larson watched monitors displaying Richard's words, alongside photos of Joseph and other victims. "We've got him," she told her assistant, Dr. James Crawford. "The murder confession seals it." Richard turned to Melissa, his voice low. "What's going on?" She showed him her phone, now buzzing with alerts about federal raids on Blackstone Industries. "Richard, they're seizing our servers." He snatched the phone, his hands trembling. "Impossible. This is fake news." But Diana's gaze met his, her calm unnerving. "It was you," he whispered, realization dawning. "You tricked me." She stood slowly, pulling a leather briefcase from her bag. Opening it, she revealed her ID to the stunned passengers. "My name is Diana Thompson, Chief Investigator for the International Criminal Court, Transnational Corporate Crimes. For 3 years, I've led an investigation into Blackstone Industries' illegal operations in the Democratic Republic of Congo, including the murders of 23 community leaders, among them Joseph Mamba, father of 2. The cabin was silent, the weight of her words sinking in. Diana continued, her voice steady. "Joseph was my first love, killed for exposing your crimes, Mr. Blackstone. Every word you've spoken today was broadcast live to authorities across 3 continents. She held up the transmitter. "Your confessions of bribery and murder are now evidence in an international case." Richard's legs buckled. "This is a setup," he stammered. Diana smiled faintly. "No, Mr. Blackstone, it's justice." Tom's voice returned over the intercom. "We're being escorted by U.S. Air Force jets to Miami, where federal agents await for legal proceedings." Passengers gasped, some pulling out phones to record the unfolding drama. Melissa frantically deleted files, but Diana shook her head. "Your servers were seized 20 minutes ago, Melissa. It's over." As the plane descended into Miami, military jets flanked its wings, a stark symbol of Richard's impending fate. Diana gathered her evidence, her son stirring in her arms. She showed him a photo of Joseph Mamba smiling with Congolese children. "Papa Joseph was a hero, baby," she whispered. The boy nodded sleepily. "Is the bad man going to jail?" Diana kissed his forehead. "Yes, sweetie, he is." The plane landed, and the doors opened to a swarm of federal agents and international media. Richard was handcuffed before he could exit, his face ashen. Agent Martinez read the charges. 23 counts of first-degree murder, crimes against humanity, and international conspiracy. Diana stepped off, carrying Joseph's son, escorted respectfully by agents. Cameras flashed, capturing her as the heroine who'd toppled an empire. She presented her briefcase to the authorities. Recordings, photos of Joseph's beating, and documents detailing Blackstone's crimes. "These are the faces of the 23 victims," she said, showing photos to the agents. "Each killed to protect Blackstone's profits." Richard's empire crumbled, accounts frozen, assets seized, contracts canceled. His $12 billion fortune evaporated in hours. Diana revealed her final truth to the media. "This boy is Joseph Mamba's son, entrusted to me by his widow, Amara, to keep him safe. I've spent 3 years ensuring Joseph's death wasn't in vain." The revelation stunned the crowd. Diana wasn't just an investigator. She was a foster mother, avenging her first love and protecting his legacy. 6 months later, Richard's trial gripped the world. He was sentenced to life without parole, Melissa to 15 years as an accomplice. Diana was promoted to executive director of international corporate crime, her salary dwarfing Richard's remaining wealth. Joseph's son attended an elite school, funded by seized assets, while Richard's children lived on government aid. Diana founded the Joseph Mamba Foundation, using Blackstone's confiscated wealth to protect 847 community leaders in 23 countries. In his cell, Richard muttered daily, "How did a maid destroy me?" But Diana was no maid. She was a lethal investigator who turned 3 hours of humiliation into decades of justice. Her story became a global documentary, exposing corporate greed and honoring the victims. Diana's final words to the camera echoed, "Never underestimate someone based on appearance. The simplest among us can topple empires." Subscribe for more stories of justice triumphing over arrogance, and share your own experiences of being underestimated in the comments below.